Did you know a single royal death in 1066 sent 3 armies hurtling toward the same crown and changed England forever? Sounds dramatic, right? That's because it was. When King Edward the Confessor of England died with no direct heir, it wasn't just a tragedy, it was a power vacuum. And history hates a vacuum. What followed was not just one battle, not even 2, but a year of maneuvering, scheming, and war that would echo across the centuries. Stay with me to uncover the wild tangle of betrayals, battles, and beheadings that history doesn't want you to sleep through. And hey, if you love slow, soothing history stories that sneak real facts into your dreams, hit that like and subscribe button to keep the past coming to your pillow. I'm dying to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Drop a comment and say hi now. Close your eyes. Let the flicker of candlelight guide you to a cold January morning in Westminster, where the bells toll slowly for a king and a kingdom on the edge. You move through stone corridors that smell faintly of incense and age. The monks murmur prayers in Latin. The wax from the candles drips in slow, deliberate drops. And in the center of it all, laying silent, is Edward, King of the English, draped in the royal shroud. His pale hands rest on his chest, clasped around a golden cross. He looks peaceful, almost like he's sleeping, if not for the tight faces surrounding him. Edward the Confessor, devout, distant, and childless, had ruled England for over 2 decades. His piety was legendary, earning him sainthood later on, but his politics less divine. He had no son, no named heir, just a web of promises and claims, and a whole cast of powerful men ready to step forward. You stand among them, ambitious earls, noble clerics, and foreign lords, all silently calculating. In the center of this storm is Harold Godwinson, England's most powerful noble. His family had been the real power behind the throne for years. Harold himself had been almost a co-ruler near the end of Edward's life, running the kingdom while the king prayed. So, it shocks no one when almost immediately after Edward's death, Harold is crowned King of England. Not in a year, not in a month. The very next day, January 6th. Talk about speedy, but you feel something in the air, unrest. There's a weight in the room that Harold can't brush off, even with the crown resting on his head. Why? Because 2 other men believe that crown should be theirs, and they're not exactly going to send polite letters of complaint. First, there's William, Duke of Normandy, a tough, cunning warrior from across the Channel in what is now northern France. William claims that years earlier, Edward had promised him the throne. More controversially, William also insists that Harold himself had sworn an oath to support his claim. Was it a heartfelt vow? A political trap? Historians still argue whether it was made at sword point or whether it even mattered. Either way, William's convinced and furious. Then there's Harald Hardrada, King of Norway. He's a Viking throwback with legendary status, literally a former mercenary commander of the Byzantine Empire's Varangian Guard. His claim is, let's call it creative. He says a previous deal between older kings means he should rule England. It's a bit like someone demanding your house because your great-great-grandparents once shared a sandwich. Still, that's 3 claimants: Harold, William, and Harold. And in the next 9 months, they'll all make their moves. Back in London, Harold isn't wasting time. He rides through the city streets, crowned and confident. The people cheer, mostly because they know him. He's English, one of their own. He's led them in battle. But the whispers have already begun about broken promises, foreign dukes, and Viking kings sharpening their blades. You wander the dusty halls of the royal court and overhear plans, alliances, scouting, defensive fortifications. Harold knows war is coming, and soon. He's building up England's coastal defenses, assembling a navy, preparing for an invasion that hasn't even been launched yet. Meanwhile, over in Normandy, William is raging. He sees Harold's coronation as theft. Worse, betrayal. You can almost hear him shouting in his hall, chainmail clinking as he paces. His barons are split, invading England is risky. But William, he's determined. He begins building a fleet, gathering ships and troops, and even petitions the Pope himself for support. We'll get to that twist in section 4. Now pause for a second. Ever notice how history loves dramatic timing? Just as William is sharpening his plans and Harold is tightening England's defenses, the weather turns strange. The winds shift. Summer becomes fall. And with it, everything is about to unravel, just not in the way anyone expects. You walk out onto the cliffs above the English Channel, watching the waves crash against the stone. You can't see them yet, but across that water, destiny is sailing toward England. Multiple destinies, actually, and all because one king died quietly in bed. Now, ask yourself, if you were Harold, would you feel secure on that throne? Or does the crown feel heavier with every sunrise? The crown rests heavy on your brow. You're Harold Godwinson, freshly crowned King of England, and for a brief moment, just a moment, you let yourself believe it might actually be okay. The people cheer. The Archbishop blesses you. The golden sunlight cuts through the stained glass of Westminster Abbey. The throne is yours now. Isn't that enough? But the truth, like the draft sneaking in through the castle stones, chills you. Because you know you didn't get here cleanly. You see, Edward the Confessor didn't exactly leave a will etched in marble. He may have whispered your name on his deathbed, and the English nobles, especially the Witan. The royal council had your back. But across the sea, Duke William of Normandy is fuming in his fortress. And in the far, frozen north, Harold Hardrada, the legendary Viking warlord, is sharpening more than just his axe. Your coronation was quick. Too quick. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a move. A chess piece dropped with force. You had to beat William to the punch. And you did. But you also woke the hornet's nest. As you walk through your court, the air is tight with whispers. Some nobles murmur about William's claim, especially the whole business with that so-called sacred oath. Supposedly, during a diplomatic trip to Normandy, you swore on holy relics, bones of saints, no less that you'd support William's claim to the throne. Now, whether that was under duress, confusion, or just a really awkward dinner party, historians still argue. Some say you were tricked. Others say you swore it knowingly, for political convenience. Either way, William believes it happened. And to him, this isn't just a betrayal. It's a violation of a sacred pact. That means you're not just a usurper. You're a perjurer, a man who lied on holy relics. In a time when people genuinely feared the wrath of God, that's a big deal. Like, smite you from above big, but you've got more immediate problems. Like the entire southern coast, you rush to prepare for a Norman invasion. Fleets are assembled along the English Channel. Beacons are set up to signal the approach of foreign sails. You gather fyrds, local militias made up of farmers and freemen, and try to instill them with the discipline of trained soldiers. You patrol, you wait, and you wait some more. Summer drags on. No sails appear. Your men grow restless. Supplies dwindle. It's hard to keep morale high when there's nothing to fight and nothing to harvest. After all, these aren't professional soldiers. They're peasants who need to get back to their fields before winter. You start dismissing men. The fleet shrinks, and just when you think maybe, just maybe, William's threat was a bluff boom, news comes from the north. Vikings! Harald Hardrada, the Viking king of Norway, has landed. He's allied with Tostig, your estranged brother. Yep. Family drama just upgraded to international disaster. Tostig, the exiled Earl of Northumbria, is bitter, and he's brought Hardrada to settle the score. They've landed with thousands of hardened warriors. Their dragon-headed ships slicing through English rivers like knives through ale foam. And now, you've got to make a choice. Stay in the south and wait for William, or rush north to stop the Viking invasion before it spreads. You don't hesitate. You race north with your housecarls, your elite warriors, and whoever else you can muster. It's a brutal journey, covering nearly 200 miles in under 2 weeks, across rocky hills, muddy paths, and flooded fords. Your men are exhausted, but they march, driven by the knowledge that if you don't stop Hardrada, England might fall before William even gets a chance. At this point, you're like the sleep-deprived manager of a medieval fast food chain, under siege from every direction. Vikings at the drive-thru, Normans in the parking lot, and you forgot to restock the pickles. It's chaos, but you push on. You have no choice. And in the distance, near a sleepy river called the Derwent, not far from the city of York, you finally spot the Norwegians. They're camped out, relaxed, sunning themselves in the late September light. They weren't expecting you. Why would they? You were in the south. They thought they had time. Oh, how wrong they were. As you rest your aching legs by a campfire, sharpening your sword and listening to the muffled snores of the men around you, you start to feel something strange. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's madness, or maybe it's the realization that this crown, this uneasy, cursed crown, might actually be yours after all, if you can hold on to it just a little longer. But deep in your gut, something twists, because while your eyes are fixed on the Vikings, someone else is watching the coast, and they're just waiting for you to turn your back. You tighten your grip on the sword hilt. Dawn breaks in golden streaks over the Yorkshire sky, and the river mist curls like ghostly breath over the land. Ahead of you lies Stamford Bridge, just east of York, and beyond it, Harald Hardrada's army. This is it. This is the moment you either save the north of England or lose everything before William even sets foot on the beach. You and your men arrive so suddenly, so brutally fast, that the Viking army is caught with their metaphorical pants down, some literally in tunics and without armor. They had no reason to expect a royal army to appear after marching over 180 miles in under 2 weeks. No Google Maps, no warning, no time to prepare. What they do have is the bridge, a narrow wooden passageway that crosses the River Derwent and becomes an accidental bottleneck. And here's where legend enters the chat. According to some accounts, A single berserker. Yes, a real Viking axe-wielding maniac holds the bridge on his own for hours. He swings wildly, cutting down English soldiers trying to cross. Some say he was stabbed from below by a soldier hiding in a barrel on the river. Is it true scholars still debate whether this dramatic standoff actually happened, or if it's just historical fan fiction at its finest? Either way, you do get across eventually, and what follows is a bloodbath. Harold Hardrada fights like a man born for the saga books. Towering, armored, and roaring Norse battle cries. He charges into the fray like Odin himself. But then it happens. An arrow. Quick, clean, straight through the throat. He falls mid-charge, a sword still in hand. A warrior's death if there ever was one. Tostig dies not long after. His rebellion, his betrayal, dies with him. The Viking army collapses. You wander the aftermath. Bodies litter the grass. Shields cracked. Axes abandoned. The sky turns orange with evening light. But there's no celebration. Just the ache of victory, the weight of command, and the knowledge that while you won this battle, you might have just lost the war. Because you remember the southern coast, you remember William, and as you sit near the flickering torchlight, with your feet blistered and your armor sticky with blood and sweat, a rider approaches. He's breathless, dirty, and his message chills you more than the Yorkshire air ever could. The Normans have landed. They came ashore at Pevensey Bay, while you were hundreds of miles away fighting Norsemen. William and his army are building fortifications, raiding the countryside, gathering supplies, and letting England know they're here to stay. You have no time, no rest, no fresh troops, and yet, somehow, you have to march south all over again. This is the moment you probably think, come on, one guy can't possibly fight two major invasions back to back. Right, but you're Harold, and you're stubborn, you're proud, and you know the people are watching. So you march again, and as you walk, blisters forming under new blisters, you think about William, the Duke of Normandy, a man who rose from illegitimacy, yes. They called him William the Bastard, to become one of the most feared leaders in Europe. He's a brilliant military mind, patient, calculated, and now he's on your soil. What's worse, he comes bearing a banner from the Pope himself. That's right. Pope Alexander II has given William his official blessing. Why? Because William convinced him that you broke a holy oath by taking the crown. Now, this isn't just war, it's a crusade. God is on William's side, or so he says, and you're still reeling from one battle, dragging your men through mud and exhaustion toward another. You finally reach the southern hills near Hastings. It's early October. Your men camp on Senlac Hill. William's forces are nearby, their banners flapping in the wind. You barely have time to build defenses. The night before the battle, you sit under the stars, sharpening your blade again. You hear your men talking, some laughing, some praying, a few just sitting silently, staring into the flames. And you wonder, how did it come to this? A crown you didn't ask for. A promise you may or may not have made. A Viking army defeated, but at what cost? You glance toward the sea, toward Normandy, toward the storm that waits for morning. You rise before the sun. The grass is wet with dew, and the sky is a flat sheet of gray, neither dark nor light, just heavy with silence. Your men stir slowly on Senlac Hill. their cloaks wrapped tight, their armor cold against their skin. Some eat quietly, some say nothing at all. And you're staring out toward the southern slope where, soon, William's Normans will appear. And they do. As the mist begins to lift, you see them rows upon rows of soldiers emerging like ghosts. Not just footmen with swords and shields, but cavalry, horses snorting in the chill, and archers. So many archers. William has come to play for keeps. And there it is again, that banner, the papal standard, fluttering alongside the Norman flag. Imagine how that must look. William isn't just here to conquer, he's here to claim divine right. His campaign isn't about land or power. Well, okay, it is, but also about justice, holiness, penance. He's cast himself as a holy avenger, and you're the villain in this script. Let's talk about that banner for a second. It's one of the strangest details of the whole conquest, the Pope's official blessing. Historians still argue why it happened. Did William bribe the papal court? Were church leaders really that invested in English succession, or was it just a convenient excuse to sanction a politically motivated war under God's name? Either way, it worked. Because as far as William's army is concerned, this isn't an invasion, it's a crusade. And that gives him momentum. Still, you hold the high ground, and that counts for something. Your troops, mainly housecarls and furred, form the legendary shield wall, locking together like a great wooden and steel serpent across the hillside. The housecarls are pros, heavy axes, mail armor, steady hands. The furred are farmers and butchers, mostly, but they're angry. And fear has a funny way of sharpening your grip on a spear. Then you hear it. Horns, drums, the clatter of hooves. The Battle of Hastings begins. The first waves of Norman foot soldiers crash into your wall like waves against rock. Your men hold, they grunt, they push, some scream, but the wall doesn't break. Above it all, you stand watching, shouting commands, your sword raised, waiting for the moment when it all starts to tip. Then come the archers. Arrows hiss overhead, thud into shields, snap against helmets. Your men hunker down, the wall flexing like a living thing. But still, it holds. Then comes William's real weapon cavalry, the Norman Knights charge, their horses pounding the earth. It's terrifying. A blur of hooves, lances, and banners. But even they can't break the wall. Your front line braces. Axes bite into legs, both man and horse, and riders go tumbling into chaos. You almost feel hope. And then, something strange happens. The Normans retreat. They turn. They run. Your men cheer. Some break rank. They chase. And that's when William's trap snaps shut. See, it wasn't panic. It was a trick. A feigned retreat. As your troops run after them, the Norman cavalry wheels around and cuts them down from behind. Panic ripples through your lines. You shout, your voice hoarse, trying to restore the wall. Your loyal housecarls rush to close the gaps. But the spell has broken. Order has cracked, and William, he's back in charge, rallying his troops. In fact, there's even a moment mid-battle where William is rumored to have fallen, and his army begins to panic until he tears off his helmet and rides through the ranks shouting, "I live, look at me." It's bold. It's dramatic. It's classic William. The battle grinds on for hours. Blood and mud mix underfoot. Arrows darken the sky. And you stay in the fight. Even as exhaustion pulls at your arms like chains, then, in the fading light of late afternoon, it happens. You look up. You see a shaft of sunlight break through the clouds. You squint, and in that moment, an arrow flies. The famous arrow, the one that, according to later tales, strikes you in the eye. Is it true? Hard to say. Some chronicles say you died by sword. Others swear it was that single, fated arrow. The Bayeux Tapestry even shows it, but with artistic ambiguity. Scholars still argue whether that image was meant to be literal, symbolic, or just medieval exaggeration. All that matters now is this. You fall, the line breaks, the king is dead, and so ends Anglo-Saxon England. The Normans swarm the hill. Your housecarls make their last stand, fighting to the death around your body. But it's done. The crown lies in the mud, soaked in blood, waiting for new hands to lift it. You lie still. But history roars forward. Your body lies motionless among the fallen on Senlac Hill. Your cloak tangled beneath you, your sword lost in the churned earth. The sun sets on a field littered with corpses, weapons, and the broken dreams of a kingdom. The air is thick with smoke and silence, no more battle cries, only the crows and the creak of armor shifting in the wind. You don't see it, but just beyond the edge of the carnage, William stands tall, mud splattered and unshaven, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He doesn't smile. He's too calculating for that, but you know, he feels it. The weight of destiny, the impossible victory. He has done what no one had done since the Romans. He has conquered England, but he hasn't won it yet. Winning a battle is one thing. Holding a kingdom, entirely different story. The first problem, the English aren't exactly welcoming him with pies and song. After all, you weren't just a king, you were their king. English, native, familiar. William is foreign, French-speaking, Frankish armored, papal blessed, sure, but alien all the same. And the nobles, oh, they're squirming. The Witan, the same royal council that crowned you just months ago, isn't exactly eager to throw open the gates to a Norman duke with a bloodied sword. They huddle in London, debating their next move. Some even consider crowning Edgar Etheling, a teenage noble with royal blood, but no military strength. It's a long shot, like handing the car keys to a kid who's only seen a horse. Meanwhile, William plays it smart. He doesn't march straight into London. Instead, he circles. He cuts off supplies. He burns villages along the Thames. It's psychological warfare. He doesn't need to fight the nobles. He just needs to show them that resistance means ruin. And it works, one by one. Earls and bishops begin to surrender. By December, they realize the writing's not just on the wall, it's carved in Latin on a sword blade. On Christmas Day, 1066, in the very same Westminster Abbey, where you were crowned less than a year before, William is crowned King of England. The Latin chants echo through the stone halls. The nobles swear fealty through gritted teeth. Somewhere in the crowd, a man shouts, "God save the king," and the Norman guards, not understanding the language, panic and set fire to the surrounding buildings. Yes, William's coronation ends with rioting and smoke. Poetic, really. From the throne, William sees none of it. He sits stiffly, unmoving, knowing that if he shows even a flicker of weakness, it's over. That's the thing with crowns. They're shiny, heavy, and very easy to lose. Back in the countryside, resistance simmers. Small rebellions begin almost immediately. Towns that once raised your banner, York, Exeter, Ely, aren't so quick to fall in line. Some still whisper your name at night, like a prayer or a curse. And William responds in the only way a medieval warlord turned king knows how, with brutality, the most infamous response, the harrying of the North. Now, we're not there yet in the story, but you'll want to keep listening, because that's where things get really dark and smoky and hungry. But for now, William starts reshaping England in his image. He brings over Norman barons, redistributes land like medieval monopoly, and begins building castles, lots of them. You ever notice how English towns have castles with French names? Yeah, that's William. London. He starts constructing the Tower of London, not just for defense, but as a symbol, a flex, a message that says I'm here, I'm watching. And no, you can't have your kingdom back. He doesn't trust the English. Why would he? So he installs Norman bishops, Norman sheriffs, even replaces Anglo-Saxon nobles with loyal followers. It's a total cultural transplant. You, meanwhile, fade from the world, but not from memory. Some say your body was buried under a cairn by the sea. Others claim your remains were taken to Waltham Abbey. Some say it was never recovered at all. The truth lost to time. Historians still debate whether your bones rest under ancient stone or simply washed into the tides of history. But your ghost, it lingers in the eyes of the peasants who still curse the new taxes, in the chants of monks who remember the old prayers, in the songs sung quietly in English, not French, and in the flicker of resistance that William, for all his castles and banners, can never quite extinguish. You're gone now. Your name fades from the lips of kings, but your shadow clings to the land like fog in a low valley. And William is learning that conquering a country is not the same as owning it. After his dramatic coronation, and those oh-so-subtle fires during the ceremony really nailed the ambiance there, he doesn't get a moment's peace. Rebellion starts sprouting like weeds in every corner of the kingdom. The English aren't done fighting, not by a long shot. It starts with murmurs in the north, in York. The people still whisper your name, and even more dangerously, they start rallying around Edgar Atheling, the last male heir of the royal Anglo-Saxon line. Sure, he's a teenager. Sure, he has no experience, but he's English. That's enough. And William, he knows what rebellion smells like. It's smoke, it's blood, it's burnt thatch. So what does he do? He turns into full medieval Batman. No mercy. He marches north. What follows is something that will echo in English memory for generations: the harrying of the North. William lays waste to Yorkshire and beyond. Farms burned, villages razed, food stores destroyed. The goal isn't just to stop rebellion, it's to make sure no one can rebel again, because they're too busy starving and freezing. Estimates vary, but some chroniclers say over 100,000 people died not from swords, but from famine, exposure, and disease. Entire regions are depopulated. Some parts of northern England, if you look at the Domesday Book decades later, are still listed as waste, literally empty. It's one of the most brutal suppression campaigns in British history. And even medieval sources, who aren't exactly squeamish, call it savage. But here's the twist: it works. The North falls silent. No more rebellions for now. No more threats. Just ashes. And that lets William focus on his favorite pastime, restructuring England, like it's a giant Lego set. He installs loyal Norman nobles in all the key territories. He builds stone castles to loom over every major city and crossroads some with moats. All with a very clear message: behave or else. The English ruling class, gone. Replaced by Normans who speak a different language, follow different customs, and introduce a whole new legal system. And oh yes, French becomes the language of the elite, while the English tongue gets pushed down to the peasantry. Imagine going from ruler to peasant overnight, because that's what happens. The church flipped. Out go the Anglo-Saxon bishops. In come Norman clerics loyal to William. It's not just political control, it's spiritual. If people start praying in Latin with a Norman accent, maybe they'll start thinking like Normans too. Now, let's pause a second. This wasn't just a government change. It was a cultural transplant, like swapping out the entire operating system of a nation. Historians still argue whether this was a necessary modernization or a cultural decapitation. Did England gain sophistication or lose its soul? And here's something fun for your next trivia night. The word cow is English, but the word beef is French. Why? Because the English peasants raised the animals, but the French lords ate them. True story. The language split is still baked into English vocabulary today. William isn't just building castles and renaming the meat. He's also watching his back. He knows his grip is only as strong as the alliances he keeps. So, he marries off his supporters, secures borders, and starts fortifying the coast just in case someone thinks about doing to him what he did to you. He also keeps an eye on Wales and Scotland, neither of which is particularly fond of Norman expansion. Skirmishes flare up. Treaties are signed, broken, resigned. It's all very medieval soap opera. And speaking of soap, people don't really use much of it, which might explain the overall ambiance at court. But let's not get distracted. By now, William is more than a conqueror. He's a builder, a reformer, a brutal enforcer. And he's about to do something no English king had ever done before he's going to write it all down. You're about to meet the Domesday Book, but we'll get to that. For now, picture William standing atop a half-built stone keep, his cloak flapping in the cold wind, staring out across a country that bends under his rule, but never quite breaks. You're gone, but the story still very much alive. You're long gone, but the England you knew is barely recognizable anyway. And William, he's not done cementing his legacy literally and figuratively. After stamping out rebellions with fire and famine, and silencing the North with a chill that'll last decades, William decides it's time to do something really ambitious. Not just build castles or redistribute land. No. He wants to count everything. Enter the Domesday Book. Sounds dramatic, right? Like something that should summon thunder every time you say it aloud. Domesday. And honestly, it kind of deserves that treatment, because in 1085, William commissions one of the most thorough surveys of any medieval kingdom ever attempted. He wants to know what he owns, who owns it under him, what taxes he can squeeze from it, and let's be real, who might be lying about how many pigs they actually have. The result? A massive 2-volume record that details every town, village, manor, ox, plow, pig, fish pond, and goose across most of England. It's bureaucracy meets ambition. A national audit, medieval style. And here's the kicker. People are terrified of it. Like, apocalyptically terrified. They call it the Book of Judgment because once it's written down, there's no appealing it. You owe what the book says you owe. Period. It's not just a ledger, it's law. Hence the name Domesday, as in doomsday. Final. Inescapable. You can almost hear the medieval peasant muttering, "Oh great. I forgot to mention my secret cow. Guess it's William's now." But the Domesday Book is more than a tax record. It's a snapshot of a transformed nation. Flip through it carefully. It's 1,000 years old, and you'll see how dramatically England has changed in just 2 decades. Anglo-Saxon nobles almost entirely gone. Norman lords installed everywhere. Churches taken over and restructured. Towns reshaped and surveilled. And while most kings would rest on their laurels after all this, William, he just keeps pushing. Because here's the thing about being a conqueror. You're never really done. He strengthens coastal defenses in case the Danes try something clever. He tightens the legal code, punishing rebellious activity with swift, often brutal, justice. He requires loyalty oaths, not just from nobles, but from everyone down to the lowest ranked knight. One of his boldest moves, the Oath of Salisbury, where every landholder in the kingdom swears direct loyalty to him, bypassing their lords. It's like a royal mic drop. You serve me, not just your baron. It's radical, it's centralized, and it works. Still, all this order doesn't come cheap, and neither does control. William's grip remains firm, but cracks start to form, especially within his own family. Let's take a moment to talk about William's sons. He has several, but the most important at this point are Robert, William Rufus, and Henry. And surprise, they don't get along. In fact, Robert, also known as Robert Curthose, not exactly a nickname that screams respect, leads a rebellion against his father. Yes, William's own son rebels, even stages attacks from Normandy, while William's busy running England. At one point, they even fight in battle, not realizing they're facing each other, until William gets knocked off his horse and Robert recognizes him and lets him go. Yikes. Thanksgiving dinner must have been awkward, but despite the internal strife, William holds on. He never really lets go of power, just delegates reluctantly and punishes freely. He spends his final years splitting time between England and Normandy, constantly putting out political fires and balancing both halves of his dual realm. Then, in 1087, during a campaign in northern France, William suffers a riding accident. He falls from his horse and is badly injured. Not the glorious battlefield end you might expect, just a mundane, painful accident. Kind of like tripping over your empire. He dies slowly, uncomfortably. And here's a macabre detail when they try to fit his bloated body into the stone tomb at Caen. It doesn't quite go. A little too snug. And in front of a solemn gathering of nobles and clergy, the body bursts. Yup, exploded right in the church. Not exactly the majestic finale for the conqueror of England. Still, the impact William leaves is undeniable. You're not here to see it, but your ghost might still wander the halls of Waltham Abbey, or through the wrecked villages of the north, or even in the thoughts of those who remember when England spoke with a different rhythm. And William, he leaves behind a world forever changed. a hybrid kingdom, not quite English, not quite Norman, but something new, something that will evolve, resist, rise again. But for now, the conqueror rests. You drift, bodiless now, through a country reshaped by iron and ink. What once felt familiar is now foreign. England doesn't quite speak your tongue anymore, not in court, not in church, not even in the markets, where fishmongers bark prices in a muddled blend of English and French. William may have passed on, his legacy sealed in stone and memory. But his shadow still stretches across every ridge and river in your homeland. Let's talk about his legacy. After William's death in 1087, the crown doesn't just pass peacefully from father to son. Oh no. This is the medieval monarchy family drama is half the job description. William's will splits his holdings. Normandy goes to his eldest son, Robert Curthose, the rebellious one. England goes to his second son, William Rufus, a red-faced, sharp-tongued man who definitely doesn't get picked first in the medieval popularity contest. And Henry, the youngest, he's left with money, just money. No land, no title. You can probably guess how well that goes. Robert's up north with a Norman duchy and a tendency to sulk. William Rufus is in Westminster, wearing the crown and already making enemies. And Henry is watching, waiting, counting coins, and biding time. But let's focus on William II, known as William Rufus. If his father ruled like a commander, Rufus rules like a brawler. He doesn't bother pretending to be pious or noble. He raises taxes, squeezes the church for wealth, and openly quarrels with the Pope. His court becomes infamous for lavish parties, sharp-tongued nobles, and a general air of, well, let's call it unkingly behavior. His relationship with the church is particularly spicy. Remember Archbishop Lanfranc, William the Conqueror's religious advisor. He was a stabilizing force. But when Lanfranc dies, Rufus delays appointing a replacement so he can keep the church's revenue for himself. Eventually, he does appoint someone Anselm, a devout and brilliant scholar. But Anselm and Rufus get along like cats and papal bulls. Their disputes are so fierce that Anselm flees to Rome. And that's not even the worst falling out in this family, because then comes the incident in the New Forest. It's 1100. William Rufus is out hunting. The sun filters through thick trees, the air sticky with summer heat. And then an arrow flies. It strikes him in the chest. He falls from his horse and dies instantly. Accident? Maybe. But historians still argue whether it was murder or misfortune. The man who fired the shot, Walter Tyrrell, a nobleman and, supposedly, a friend. He flees the scene and bolts to France. Suspicious. You bet. But here's where the plot thickens, like medieval stew. Henry, William's younger brother, the one who inherited nothing but silver, just happens to be nearby. And as Rufus bleeds out under the trees, Henry rushes to Winchester, seizes the royal treasury, and claims the throne before Robert can even saddle his horse. That, my friend, is what you call an opportunist with good timing. Henry becomes Henry I, and he proves to be sharp, capable, and surprisingly well-liked. He restores order, charms the nobility, and even marries Edith, a descendant of Anglo-Saxon royalty. Yes, your bloodline. She changes her name to Matilda, but the symbolism is clear. Henry is trying to reunite Norman rule with English heritage. And the people, they kind of love it. After all, it's been decades since your death. The wounds have scarred, but not faded. Anglo-Saxons may have lost the crown, but their legacy still pulses in the culture language, custom, tradition. Henry's marriage feels like a thread stitching the past back into the present. But let's be honest, it's still a Norman world. Castles continue rising across the countryside. The feudal system, imported from France, remains firmly in place. The church is more powerful, more centralized, and English law starts to evolve, blending Norman customs with old Anglo-Saxon codes. You wouldn't recognize all of it, but you'd see the tension, old and new, side by side. Back to Henry. His reign isn't all peaceful. He fights wars in Normandy, clashes with barons, and like every good medieval king, imprisons a few family members along the way. One especially cruel twist: he captures his older brother Robert, the one who got Normandy, and locks him in a tower for 28 years. Family, right. Still, Henry's reign is largely successful until tragedy strikes. In 1120, the White Ship sinks off the coast of Barfleur. A royal vessel carrying Henry's only legitimate son, William Adelin, drowns. Along with him, over 300 nobles, knights, and heirs. It's one of the worst maritime disasters of the Middle Ages, and it plunges the kingdom into a crisis that will echo for decades. Henry is left without a male heir, so he does something bold. He names his daughter, Matilda, as his successor, a woman ruling England in the 1100s. You can imagine how well that goes, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's a story for another section. For now, picture the Norman legacy sitting heavy on the throne, born in conquest, baptized in rebellion, and destined for chaos. And all the while, you linger in the forgotten abbeys, in the ghost stories, in the silence before dawn. You hover in the fading warmth of a changing world, your name a murmur, your legacy buried beneath layers of stone, French phrases and laws rewritten by candlelight. But oh, if you could see the storm gathering now, because the Norman legacy that William and Henry fought so hard to cement, it's about to buckle under the weight of a woman's claim to power. Let's rewind a second. After the sinking of the White Ship in 1120, yes, the one that swallowed Henry II's only legitimate son, England, slips into a royal identity crisis. You can practically hear the scribes muttering, "Here we go again." Henry is left with one legitimate child, his daughter, Matilda. She's smart, formidable, raised to rule, and, let's be honest, not thrilled about being underestimated because of, patriarchy. Henry pushes hard to get the nobles to accept her. He even has them swear oaths not once, but twice to recognize her as his heir. Nobles nod. They smile. They take the oaths. Then Henry dies in 1135, reportedly from eating too many lampreys. Yes, a fatal fish dinner. You can add that to your list of weird medieval ways to die. And the second he's in the ground, those oaths, poof, worth about as much as a broken sword. Instead of Matilda, the crown lands on the head of Stephen of Blois, Henri's nephew. Charming, likable, and above all, male. He races to London, gets crowned, and starts handing out titles like they're leftover bread rolls. Smart move. For a minute, it works. But Matilda, she's not amused. Cue the entrance of one of the most chaotic periods in English history, the Anarchy. That's not just a fun nickname. That's literally what chroniclers call it. Imagine opening a book and reading, and then England just melted down. For nearly 2 decades, 1153, the kingdom spirals into civil war between Stephen and Matilda. Castles change hands like poker chips. Loyalties flip daily. Roads become unsafe. The people suffer. A chronicler famously writes, "Christ and his saints slept. Translation, even heaven gave up on England for a while. Matilda gains ground early." She storms across southern England with her half-brother, Robert of Gloucester, seizes win after win, and even manages to capture Stephen himself at one point. She rides into London, ready to be crowned Queen of England. But here's where it unravels. Because Matilda is brilliant, but not exactly warm and fuzzy, the people of London, once hopeful, start grumbling. Her demeanor is imperious, her taxes aggressive, and her popularity evaporating faster than ale at a peasant wedding. A few unkind words, some bad timing, and suddenly the London crowd rises up, chases her out of the city, and sends her back to square one. Stephen is released in a prisoner exchange. The war rages on. You drifting unseen watch towns burn, churches looted, fields left to rot. Nobles build illegal castles, fortresses that sprout like mushrooms across the countryside. No king strong enough to stop them. No queen crowned to bring peace. Historians still argue whether this was a true civil war or a prolonged collapse of central authority. But the result's the same chaos. But out of this wreckage, a new figure emerges, Matilda's son, Henry of Anjou. He's young, fierce, raised on stories of your people and his mother's unyielding defiance. By 1150s, he's already ruling parts of France and has the charisma to unite fractured forces. And here's where history twists again. In 1153, Henry invades England. Instead of another round of bloody war, something unexpected happens. Stephen offers peace. Why? He's tired. His son, his heir, has just died. His army is worn thin. And Henry offers a future. They strike a deal. Stephen remains king. But when he dies, Henry will inherit the throne. And in 1154, Stephen dies. Peacefully. Just like that. Henry of Anjou becomes Henry II, founding the Plantagenet dynasty, one that will rule for over 3 centuries. You'd like this Henry. He's sharp, ruthless, yes, but effective, and married to Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful and fascinating women in medieval Europe. Their descendants, well, that story's just getting started. But in the ashes of the anarchy, something unexpected has emerged, a stronger monarchy, forged by necessity. Nobles are wary now of defying royal power. The crown has learned hard lessons. You, the ghost of a king who ruled for just 9 months, might weep at what was lost, but marvel at what comes next. A unified England, an Anglo-Norman identity, and the slow but steady birth of a kingdom that will someday claim to rule not just England, but an empire. But don't drift off just yet. There are still betrayals, battles, and one archbishop who's about to get into serious trouble. You move like mist now, silent through stone corridors and shadowed cloisters. And here, in the echo of war's end, and peace's fragile beginning. Rises a monarch unlike any before Henry II, the first Plantagenet king of England. You watch him take the throne in 1154, just 21 years old. His auburn hair tousled from wind and war, his hands calloused from campaigning across Normandy and Anjou. He's not a crowned boy playing at king. He's sharp, strategic, and he doesn't waste time. He inherits a kingdom still groggy from the anarchy, lawless, scarred, and skeptical. Roads are unsafe. Castles not authorized by the crown, so-called adulterine castles, still pepper the landscape like defiant little teeth. Henry begins his reign by tearing them down. Order must be restored. Power must be central. The message is clear. There is one king. You will listen. But Henry doesn't just wield the sword, he wields the law. He transforms England's judicial system. Royal justices begin traveling the countryside, creating what becomes the basis of common law, a system that doesn't depend on who you are or what noble you swear to, but on precedent and royal authority. Courts, juries, writs, it all begins to solidify under Henry's hand. And yet, for all his structure and efficiency, Henry's greatest conflict won't come from rebel barons or rival kings. It will come from his best friend. Enter Thomas Becket. The two of them start as close allies. Thomas is appointed Chancellor of England, a high royal officer, trusted and witty, quick with a joke, and quicker still with policy. Henry adores him. They feast together. They laugh. They scheme. So, when the position of Archbishop of Canterbury opens up, Henry thinks perfect. He'll put Thomas there. The church will be loyal. The realm will be unified under king and God. Easy. Oh, Henry, because the moment Becket becomes archbishop, he changes. Gone is the wine-soaked chancellor. In his place stands a man of deep conviction, wrapped in robes and cloaked in spiritual fire. Becket now believes his loyalty lies with God first, King second, and Henry. He's furious. He wanted a puppet. He got a prophet. Their feud erupts over legal jurisdiction, specifically whether clergy accused of crimes should be tried in church courts, as Becket insists, or royal ones, as Henry demands. It sounds niche, but it's not. It's about power. Who gets to judge? Who gets to rule? Becket refuses to yield. He flees to France. Henry fumes. Letters fly. Negotiations stall. Years pass in this tense standoff. Until finally, in 1170, Becket returns to England, and here it happens. The most infamous moment of Henry's reign, one cold December day. Henry, in a moment of exhausted rage, supposedly mutters, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" 4 knights hear the words and decide, "Say no more." Your Majesty, they ride to Canterbury Cathedral, enter the sacred space, and before the horrified eyes of monks and worshippers murder Thomas Becket at the altar, spilling blood on holy stone. The world is stunned. Even Henry, who never directly ordered the hit, is forced to do public penance. He walks barefoot through Canterbury. He's flogged by monks. The church reclaims moral authority in a single, dramatic sweep. Becket is declared a saint almost immediately. Pilgrims begin traveling to his tomb. The site becomes one of the most sacred in England, and Henry, he survives the scandal, but the ghost of Becket will haunt him forever. Funny, isn't it a king who conquered with courts and castles is nearly undone by a single act of whispered frustration? But don't mistake Henry for weakened. he continues to rule with vigor, expanding English holdings in France, marrying off his children into dynasties across Europe. He even fathers a line that will become legend, though not for reasons he might hope. His sons, Henry, the young king, Richard, Geoffrey, and John, well, let's just say they don't exactly spend their time writing Father's Day cards, rebellions, betrayals, civil wars. Henry's later years become a family feud, soaked in armor and ambition, but that comes later. For now, you watch this king, this builder of laws and breaker of friendships, as he rides across a land still learning to call itself whole. His reign has changed the DNA of England, its justice, its governance, its uneasy marriage of church and crown. And somewhere beneath the surface, your name, your short reign still flickers like a candle's last breath. Because if not for you, for your fall, for the chaos that followed, none of this would be here. The Becket feud, the Plantagenet dynasty, even the idea of a common law. History turns on strange hinges, and you were one of them. You float above England now, as though watching it exhale castles, aging like wine-stained manuscripts. Fields rippling under newly tamed law, and the memory of kings flickering like ghost light through abbeys and halls. But peace, oh, that never lasts long in royal bloodlines, especially not among the sons of Henry II. Let's talk about this brood of ambitious, battle-hardened boys. Henry's sons aren't just rebellious, they're Olympic-level betrayers, each seemingly born with a sword in one hand and a grudge in the other. You start with Henry the young king. Crowned during his father's lifetime, a tradition meant to ensure smooth succession. But the title comes with no actual power, just shiny robes and ceremonial parades. Imagine being a teenage prince expected to rule, but not actually allowed to do anything. You might throw a tantrum too, and so he does. In 1173, young Henry joins a rebellion against his own father, alongside his brothers, Richard and Geoffrey, and with support from their mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Oh yes, Mom gets involved. She's imprisoned for years afterward. Happy Mother's Day. The rebellion is crushed, but the damage is done. Trust is a luxury the House of Plantagenet can't afford. Young Henry dies in 1183 of dysentery during yet another campaign medieval code for drank bad water after backstabbing Dad. That leaves Richard, later known as the Lionheart, and John, the baby of the family. But Richard, he's not interested in court life. He wants glory, crusades, songs sung in his name, and he gets it. When Henry II finally dies in 1189, betrayed, broken, abandoned by the sons he tried to raise into rulers, Richard becomes king. And just like that, you're witnessing another turning point. Richard Phryne is crowned in Westminster Abbey. He's tall, dashing, speaks better Occitan than English, and has already earned a reputation as a brilliant military leader. And what does he do? He almost immediately leaves England. Seriously, he spends only about 6 months of his 10-year reign on English soil. The rest crusading to Richard. Kingship is a stage, a pageant, a legacy earned with siege engines and steel not scribes and taxes. He joins the Third Crusade, marching to reclaim Jerusalem from Saladin, the formidable Muslim general who had recently taken the Holy City. And while Richard never does retake Jerusalem, He does win several major battles and carves his name into history with sword-edge precision. There's a certain charisma to him, isn't there? The kind that inspires both loyalty and songs, but also bills, because crusades aren't free back home. England groans under the weight of taxes to fund his campaigns. Entire forests are sold. Nobles are bled dry. Even the Saladin tithe, a special tax, is levied to bankroll holy war. Then comes Richard's famous misfortune. On his way home from the Crusades, he's captured near Vienna by Duke Leopold of Austria. Yes, kidnapped, held for ransom. The ransom, a staggering 150,000 marks, about 3 times the annual income of the English crown. England pays it, every penny, because they want their Lionheart back, and they get him, but the damage lingers. The treasury is nearly empty. The people, exhausted. And Richard, he dies in 1199 from an arrow wound in France, fighting in yet another petty feud over a castle. He dies childless, and the crown, like a cursed prize, passes to the last remaining brother, John. Ah yes, John Lackland. The name already screams insecurity. If Richard was the dazzling hero, John is the moody, younger sibling, skulking in the background. His reign begins with promise, but quickly spirals. You watch as this new king offends nobles, squeezes money from the church, loses massive swaths of French territory, and earns a reputation for paranoia, cruelty, and incompetence. The people call him Soft Sword. Monks write of his failures with an almost giddy malice. Historians still argue whether John was truly the worst king in English history, or just the most unlucky. Either way, the bar is low. And when John picks a fight with the Pope by refusing to accept the Pope's candidate for Archbishop of Canterbury, he's excommunicated. That's right, spiritually benched by the church. England is placed under interdict, meaning no weddings, no burials, no sacraments. The kingdom becomes a theological ghost town. Eventually, John caves. He even gives England to the Pope, swearing fealty to Rome to get back in their good graces. Yes, he literally hands the entire kingdom over as a papal fief. Talk about desperate. But the true breaking point, taxes, war, and failure. John loses Normandy, and then more. Nobles begin plotting. Discontent simmers, and in 1215, under pressure from barons and rebels, John is forced to seal the most famous document in English history, the Magna Carta. Now, before you picture proud parchment and golden scales of justice, remember, this wasn't meant to be a democracy starter pack. It was a desperate truce between a king and his fed-up lords. It limited royal authority, promised fair trials, protected baronial rights, and planted the seed, just a seed of constitutional rule. You float above the Thames as the charter is sealed at Runnymede. And maybe you smile, because in the long sweep of time, this moment matters. You ruled for 9 months, barely enough to raise a banner. But this is a world reshaped by conquest, rebellion, and relentless kings, each one dancing on the bones of the last. And you're still here, watching, waiting, whispering. You hover at the edge of a chilly English dawn, where barons pace like wolves and kings sign parchments with trembling hands. The Magna Carta has been sealed, but its ink is barely dry before the winds of conflict stir again. Because, of course, King John doesn't mean it. He signs Magna Carta at Runnymede in June 1215, under immense pressure. Yes, but almost immediately begins plotting to undo it. He appeals to his new best friend, the Pope. Remember how he handed over the entire kingdom like a medieval gift card? And Pope Innocent III obliges, in a papal bull. The charter is nullified. Poof. Gone. The Pope calls it shameful and demeaning, unfit for royal dignity. Well, that goes over splendidly. The barons erupt. War breaks out again. This time, it's full-blown civil war. The First Barons' War, to be precise. And just to make things really interesting, the rebels invite a French prince to take the English throne. Yes, Prince Louis, son of the King of France, sails over with an army and even takes London. Imagine being John, a king so unpopular, your own nobles beg a French invader to rule instead. Yikes. But before things collapse entirely, John dies. It's 1216. He's ill. Maybe dysentery. Maybe food poisoning. Either way, he dies at Newark Castle, muttering and moaning, leaving his crown in a heap of doubt and debt. And suddenly, all eyes turn to his son, Henry III. Just 9 years old. Now here's a twist you didn't expect. Young Henry is crowned in a hurry, literally with his mother's gold bracelet, as a crown substitute because the royal regalia is missing or possibly lost in a swamp. But that's another story. A regency forms around him, with William Marshal, England's most respected knight and statesman, at the helm. Marshal moves fast. He reissues Magna Carta, tweaks a few clauses, and wins over many barons. Prince Louis is pushed out, and just like that, England has another Plantagenet king, Henry III. Fitterbir reigns for a whopping 56 years. But don't confuse longevity with brilliance. His rule is marked by extravagant spending. He loved Gothic cathedrals, favoritism toward foreign courtiers, which made English barons very grumpy, and constant struggles over money and authority. Still, you watch as something peculiar unfolds. Magna Carta. It keeps coming back, reissued again and again, like a haunting refrain. A reminder that even if kings forget their promises, the people and their lords don't. In fact, that document, originally written to stop John's tantrums, starts taking on a life of its own. Lawyers, clerics, and later thinkers begin to reinterpret its clauses. What started as a feudal truce starts to evolve into a symbol of liberty. By the time you reach the reign of Edward, Thirster Henry's son, the fierce warrior king known as Longshank's Magna Carta is practically a national treasure. And Edward, he's no pushover. He conquers Wales, builds massive stone castles like Caernarfon and Conwy, and passes sweeping legal reforms. He's also deeply interested in Parliament. Yes, that word starts becoming real now. He invites knights and burgesses commoners to attend councils, not out of democratic virtue, mind you, but because he needs their money. Still, the precedent is set. The roots of representative government are being planted, and Magna Carta, it's confirmed in statute. Again and again, until even the illiterate can recite parts of it by memory. You drift through these royal halls as traditions build, like sediment, layered, weathered, but enduring. And while you're at it, let's talk about something unexpected: language. In the decades following the conquest, England's upper class spoke French. Government documents, French. Legal records, Latin. The English language was demoted, muttered by peasants and tucked away in village corners. But slowly, so slowly, it claws back. By the 14th century, English begins re-emerging. A curious blend, now Anglo-Saxon roots, tangled with Norman vocabulary, strong, rich, flexible. The voice of a new identity. You pause here, where a forgotten king might smile, because the language once spoken by kings, yours, for a blink of a rain, is beginning to return, transformed, but still breathing. And in this moment, the realm feels like it's becoming something new. Not just Norman, not just Saxon, but English. It will take centuries more. Of course, rebellions, plagues, wars with France, and whispers of heresy. But the foundation is here, humming beneath the feet of kings who never met you, and scribes who forgot your name. Even as England hardens under royal law, it also grows restless, because the balance between crown and subject, it keeps shifting. And soon, sooner than anyone expects, another king will push too far, and the people, they'll push back. You linger now in a realm both familiar and strange, England of the late 13th and early 14th century. The air smells of wet parchment and forge smoke, and everywhere you look, Parliament is growing bolder, kings more ambitious, and the people increasingly aware of themselves. Your presence drifts to the footsteps of Edward II, son of Longshanks. Now, if his father was all grit and governance, Edward II is, let's just say, a different flavor of monarch. Where Edward I carved his name into stone castles and legal codes, Edward II prefers poetry, pageantry, and his deeply unpopular companion Piers Gaveston. Now, listen, we're not here to gossip, but Edward's unshakable favoritism toward Gaveston raises more than a few noble eyebrows. Titles, lands, influence, Gaveston receives it all. And the barons, oh, they boil. Eventually, they band together to issue the ordinances of 1311, stripping the king of much of his authority and exiling Gaveston. But Edward brings him back, of course he does. And in 1312, Gaveston is captured by rebellious nobles and executed without royal permission. Edward never truly recovers. Then, just to keep things spicy, he leads a disastrously bad military campaign in 1314, the Battle of Bannockburn. You float over the chaos of muddy Scottish fields as Robert the Bruce crushes Edward's army. It's one of England's most humiliating defeats. Scotland remains independent, a thorn in the Plantagenet side for decades to come. At home, barons grow more frustrated. The king is indecisive. England feels rudderless. And worst of all, a famine hits. Between 1315 and 1317, crops fail across Europe. People starve. Whole villages vanish. Your ghostly fingers trace the outlines of desperation. People eating bark, salt prices soaring, parents leaving infants at monastery doors. This isn't just politics anymore. This is survival. And in that atmosphere, Edward II's rule cracks apart. By 1326, his own queen, Isabella of France, joins forces with her lover, Roger Mortimer, and invades England. They capture Edward. He is deposed by Parliament, yes, officially, and replaced by his teenage son, Edward III. Edward II is imprisoned, humiliated, and in 1327 dies in captivity under deeply suspicious circumstances. Historians still argue whether he was murdered or died naturally, but the tales are dark, very dark. Let's just say, medieval chroniclers loved a gruesome rumor, and now you turn your gaze to his son, Edward III, one of the most dazzling kings England ever sees. He's just 14 when crowned, but unlike his father, he's all ambition and armor. He quickly removes Mortimer and Isabella from power and begins ruling on his own terms. And then he claims France. Yes. In 1337, Edward declares himself rightful king of France through his mother's lineage, kicking off the infamous, exhausting, and utterly chaotic 100 Years' War. You glide over fields, turn to battlefields, banners snapping in the wind. Crécy, Poitiers, Agincourt comes later. But even now, the sheer scale of this conflict stuns the soul. And it's not just battles. This war defines national identity. Englishmen, once a fractured lot of Saxon peasants and Norman nobles, begin to speak of England as their land, their country, not just the king's domain. And the language, it's shifting. The Chancery Standard, a form of English used in government, is starting to rise. French is slipping. Latin still lingers. But English is coming back to life like a tree, re-sprouting from a cut stump. But then, the plague comes. You've heard of it. You've probably whispered the word Black Death. It arrives by ship. Rats, fleas, a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. By the time it moves through England, 1/3 to 1/2 of the population is dead. Entire towns vanish. Clergy die in droves. Land lies fallow. The labor force collapses. And weirdly, in that horror, opportunity grows. With fewer workers, peasants gain bargaining power. They demand higher wages, better conditions. The economic model begins to shift, and the rigid feudal structure already creaking starts to fracture. England is changing. Edward III dies in 1337, and the crown passes to his 10-year-old grandson, Richard II. You brace yourself, because now, that rising class of working folk, the ones left behind by plague and war, they're about to speak up. Loudly, in 1381, the peasants' revolt explodes. You drift over London in flames as thousands of peasants march in, led by the charismatic Wat Tyler, demanding an end to serfdom, lower taxes, and real justice. They storm the tower, execute royal officials, demand an audience with the king, and the teenage Richard II, just 14, faces them in person at Smithfield. Tyler is killed. The revolt collapses, but the message, it's burned into memory. The lower orders will not remain silent forever. Richard promises reform, then backtracks. His reign crumbles. He becomes increasingly authoritarian, paranoid, and disconnected. Eventually, his cousin Henry Bolingbroke returns from exile, rallies support, and deposes Richard in 1399. A new house rises, the House of Lancaster, and you, watching from the centuries, might murmur, all this from a boy emperor who once clutched a scroll, trembling as the world shifted beneath him. Because the line never broke, it twisted, it frayed, but it held, and it's still unraveling. You feel it now, a slow, smoldering tension coiling beneath your feet. as the Wars of the Roses stir from the soil of history. But before blood begins soaking banners red and white, you hover above a kingdom still trying to balance itself on the blade of royal ambition. Henry IV, the first Lancastrian king, has taken the throne not by right of clear succession, but by strength, cleverness, and just enough public support to make it stick. But something in the foundation has shifted, because when a king can be replaced, then perhaps any king can. Henry IV spends much of his reign fending off rebellions from the Welsh under Owain Glyndwr, a name you're now whispering with a curious smile to the Percy family in the north. The kingdom is a tapestry of tension stitched together, but barely holding. Henry's health declines. His guilt deepens. Some say he sees Richard II's ghost in his sleep. And in 1413, his crown passes to Henry V. Ah yes, Henry V, the once wild prince who drank in taverns, fought in alleys, and ignored lectures, suddenly transformed into a warrior king Shakespeare would later canonize with patriotic poetry. And guess what? The legends aren't wrong. Within 2 years of his coronation, Henry V invades France. Why the usual reasons: dynastic claims, honor, glory, and just maybe a desire to prove that England still matters on the continental stage. The result? The Battle of Agincourt, 1415. Picture it now. Muddy fields, outnumbered English troops, and waves of gleaming French knights charging forward like steel waves. And the English, they win spectacularly. In part thanks to a rainstorm, some well-placed stakes, and the unmatched lethality of the English longbow. It's one of the most famous military upsets in medieval history. Henry doesn't stop there. He signs the Treaty of Troy in 1420, marrying Catherine of Valois, daughter of the French king, and being recognized as heir to the French throne. It's a diplomatic and military masterpiece. He's on top of the world. He's 34, and then he dies, suddenly, in 1422, probably from dysentery. Again with the dysentery. Seriously, medieval monarchs should have carried more clean water, and just like that, his crown passes to a baby. Yes, Henry VI, only 9 months old, becomes King of England and France, a dual monarchy held together by the most fragile thread, an infant's cradle. And that's when you feel the air grow heavier, because Henry VI is no warrior. He's no Henry Felst. He's gentle, deeply religious, thoughtful. But in a world ruled by steel and suspicion, those traits make him vulnerable. The court fractures. Powerful nobles maneuver for control. Two factions begin to coalesce around different claims to influence, and soon, to the throne. On one side, the House of Lancaster, symbolized by a red rose. On the other, the House of York, bearing a white rose. Welcome, dear listener, to the Wars of the Roses. It begins in 1455. But even before the first sword is drawn, you feel the kingdom already in conflict with itself, disillusioned by a king unable to lead, drained by French wars, and furious at corruption and favoritism in court. Henry VI suffers a mental breakdown in 1453, unable to speak, move, or recognize anyone for over a year. During this time, Richard, Duke of York, is named Protector of the Realm. And when Henry recovers, he promptly undoes everything Richard did. Naturally, war follows. You're now watching family members turn on each other, cousins slashing cousins, noble houses burning down their own ancestral legacies in pursuit of a crown no one can wear without bleeding for it. The Battle of Towton in 1461 becomes the largest and bloodiest battle on English soil. Tens of thousands fight. Snow falls. Blood stains the snow red. Its horror and glory all wrapped in a white rose's petals. The Yorkists win. Edward IV, Richard's son, becomes king. For a moment, it seems like things will settle. Edward is strong, popular, and charismatic. But he marries for love, not politics, choosing Elizabeth Woodville, a commoner and a widow. This enrages his key supporter, the powerful Earl of Warwick, who promptly rebels. What follows is a dizzying back and forth. Edward is dethroned. Then he regains the crown. The Lancastrians make a comeback, then fade again. And you, dear spirit of the past, barely have time to breathe before everything changes again. Because Edward dies unexpectedly in 1483. His son, Edward V, is only 12. And who steps in as Lord Protector? Richard, Duke of Gloucester, Edward's brother, a man later known as Richard III. What happens next is one of the most debated episodes in English history. Edward V and his brother, known as the Princes in the Tower, are lodged in the Tower of London. And then they disappear. Historians still argue whether Richard III had them killed or if someone else did. But their absence is deafening. Richard seizes the throne, and just like that, another king with a questionable claim wears the crown. But Richard doesn't last long, because in 1485, at Bosworth Field, a new challenger arises. Henry Tudor, descendant of the Lancastrian line, through a very complicated and technically illegitimate path. Richard III dies in battle, famously crying, "A horse, a horse, my kingdom for a horse, thank you." Shakespeare. And the crown rolls literally into a new dynasty. You float above the battlefield, the wind whispering through broken banners and cracked armor. As the Tudor rose, a union of red and white begins to bloom. The Wars of the Roses are over, but England, it's just getting started. You hover now over a kingdom reborn England under the Tudor dynasty, where crowns are worn with cautious pride and ambition walks arm in arm with paranoia. The bloodshed of the Wars of the Roses hasn't vanished. It's just gone quiet, hidden beneath gilded ceilings and polished floors. At the center of this fragile peace stands Henry VII, the first Tudor king, cautious, calculating, less a warrior, more a chess player. He marries Elizabeth of York, uniting the red and white roses, and plants the seeds of something new, a centralized monarchy that answers to no one. Henry spends much of his reign fixing the kingdom's economy and squashing rebellions like dandelions. Pretenders to the throne pop up like Perkin Warbeck, who claims to be one of the lost princes in the Tower. Henry's response: cold, strategic, ruthless when necessary. But despite the tension, England stabilizes, trade improves, the royal treasury grows fat again. And when Henry VII dies in 1509, his son steps forward, young, athletic, golden-haired, a king from a storybook. Henry the South, you've heard of him, the one with the 6 wives, the famous portrait, and the glint of danger in his eyes. But he doesn't start as a tyrant, not right away. At first, you see a charming Renaissance prince, eager to impress. He composes music, he hunts, He jousts, and he marries Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, to maintain diplomatic ties with Spain. But then comes the succession crisis. Catherine gives birth multiple times, but only one child survives, a girl named Mary. Henry wants a male heir, desperately, obsessively, and so he sets his sights on Anne Boleyn, a clever, spirited lady-in-waiting who refuses to be just another mistress. Here's the twist. The Pope won't annul Henry's marriage to Catherine. Divorce isn't just a relationship issue anymore. It's a theological minefield. So what does Henry do? He breaks away from the Roman Catholic Church. In 1534, with the Act of Supremacy, he declares himself supreme head of the Church of England, the Pope irrelevant, Rome abandoned, and suddenly, the English Reformation ignites not over doctrine, but desire. You feel the tremor ripple through every village. Monasteries are dissolved, treasures seized, monks scattered. Some adapt, others resist and die for it. Henry marries Anne. She gives birth to another girl, Elizabeth. You catch the flicker in Henry's eye. He's disappointed, yes, but not yet broken. Anne falls from favor, accused of adultery, incest, treason. She's executed at the Tower of London in 1536. Henry remarries. Jane Seymour gives him a son. Edward VI then dies days later. 3 more wives follow Anne of Cleves divorced. Catherine Howard executed, and Catherine Parr survived. It's like a historical dating show with fatal consequences. By the time Henry VIII dies in 1547, he leaves behind 3 children from 3 different mothers and a nation forever changed. First comes Edward VI, just a boy. His reign is short and dominated by Protestant advisors. England shifts even further from Catholic tradition. Then, after Edward's death, at 15 comes Mary, a daughter of Catherine of Aragon, and a devout Catholic. She tries to reverse the Reformation. You watch as the fires of Marian persecution light up the skies. Protestants are burned at the stake. Bishops, farmers, women, even young students. She earns the name Bloody Mary. And though her motivations stem from faith and her mother's legacy, history remembers the flames more than the prayers. Mary dies childless in 1558, and so the crown passes to Elizabeth I, the daughter of Anne Boleyn. The girl Henry once frowned at for not being a boy becomes one of England's greatest monarchs. And here, you pause, because Elizabeth's reign is a thing of drama, brilliance, tension, and near miraculous survival. She never marries. She dances between foreign kings, Protestant reformers, and Catholic assassins. She juggles war, plague, and treason with the poise of a masterful performer. The Spanish Armada defeated, the arts flourish, hello, Shakespeare. The English identity crystallized. Elizabeth becomes not just a queen, but a symbol of resilience, of wit, of power in a world dominated by men. She dies in 1603, having reigned for 45 years. And when she does, the Tudor dynasty ends. A new house takes the throne, the Stuarts, beginning with James VI of Scotland. Now, James the Royal of England, and with him, the seeds of a new storm begin to grow. Because while the Tudors fought to centralize power, the Stuarts will push it too far, and the people, they're ready to push back. The year is 1603. You hover above the somber stillness of a royal chamber, where Elizabeth I has just passed, and a hush drapes over England. After the flare and fire of the Tudor age, a new monarch rises, not English-born, but Scottish. James VI of Scotland becomes James I of England. And just like that, the Stuart dynasty begins. James is the first to rule both England and Scotland, two thrones under one crown. He likes peace, poetry, and the divine right of kings. That delightful idea that monarchs answer to God, alone, not Parliament, not the people, and certainly not nosy nobles. You can already guess how well that goes. James is an intellectual, sure. He commissions the famous King James Bible in 1611, a literary masterpiece and religious standard still quoted today. But he also has a knack for irritating Parliament, especially when it comes to money and royal prerogatives. Tensions build quietly, like steam in a kettle. And speaking of steam, something else is bubbling religious paranoia. James survives the gunpowder plot in 1605, yes, that gunpowder plot. The one with Guy Fawkes and a cellar full of explosives. The plan: blow up the king and all of Parliament in one dramatic boom. The reason: Catholic frustration over persecution. The attempt fails. The conspirators are tortured and executed. And England doubles down on Protestant identity. You might even say a whole firework holiday is born from it, remember? But it's not just Guy Fawkes that leaves a legacy. James's uneasy reign lays the groundwork for the real drama. Because when he dies in 1625, his son Charles I steps into the throne and walks right into the biggest constitutional crisis in English history. Charles is tall, dignified, and deeply convinced that he rules by divine right. But where James was slippery and diplomatic, Charles is rigid. He marries a Catholic French princess, which already raises eyebrows. Then he tries to rule without Parliament for 11 years. He imposes taxes like ship money even in peacetime and cracks down on religious dissenters, especially the Puritans, who are increasingly vocal in their demand for reform. People grow restless. Parliament demands a say, and Charles, he refuses. He even tries to arrest 5 members of Parliament in person, storming into the House of Commons with armed guards. The MPs have already fled. The Speaker refuses to reveal their whereabouts. In that moment, something breaks, and by 1642, England plunges into civil war. It's royalists versus parliamentarians, cavaliers versus roundheads, crown versus commons. You soar over battlefields like Marston Moor and Naseby, watching smoke rise and muskets fire. The parliamentarians are led by a stern, devout, utterly relentless man named Oliver Cromwell. Under Cromwell's leadership, Parliament's new model army crushes royal forces. Charles is captured, tried, and in 1649 executed. Let that sink in. An English king beheaded by his own people. It's unprecedented. It's seismic. For the first time, England becomes a republic, the Commonwealth of England, led not by a king, but by Cromwell, who eventually takes the title of Lord Protector. Now, Cromwell isn't exactly a fun-time guy. He bans theater, cracks down on drinking, and imposes strict Puritan morality. Theaters go dark. Christmas is canceled literally. Some historians admire his military brilliance and vision for a more equal society. Others call him a dictator in all but name. And remember, historians still argue whether Cromwell's rule was a bold experiment in republicanism or just monarchy in disguise. He dies in 1658. And guess what his son, Richard Cromwell flops as a leader. The Republic crumbles. The people, tired of instability, invite Charles II, son of the executed king, to return. The Restoration begins in 1660. You breathe in the air of a jubilant, messy, revived England. Theaters reopen. Wigs get taller. Laughter returns. Charles II is charming, witty, and determined not to be his father, but he's no fool. He balances royal power carefully, plays Parliament like a fiddle, and keeps a dozen mistresses while fathering no legitimate heirs. He dies in 1685. Enter James II, his Catholic brother. And here we go again. James tries to re-Catholicize England, appoints Catholics to top offices, suspends laws, even has a Catholic son, which threatens a whole new Catholic dynasty. Protestant nobles panic. They invite William of Orange, a Dutch Protestant married to James's daughter Mary, to invade. He lands in 1688. James flees. No shots fired, no civil war. It's the glorious revolution. And here's the kicker. William and Mary don't take the crown as divine rulers. They accept limits. They sign the Bill of Rights, 1689, cementing Parliament's supremacy over the monarchy. From this point on, kings and queens rule with Parliament, not above it. It's the beginning of constitutional monarchy, the very system that still governs the United Kingdom today. And as you drift above the dawn of the 18th century, you feel the kingdom reshaped not by a single sword or sermon, but by centuries of push and pull, failure and reform, blood and paper. The monarchy survives, yes, but it will never again reign unchecked. And the people, they're beginning to believe in the power of law, of representation, of something more than crowns. You rise into the final golden light of the century, the air buzzing with change not just in England, but across the world. The monarchs are still here, but they're different now. Checked, restrained, symbolic. Behind them, Parliament, increasingly dominant. Ahead of them, an empire swelling beyond imagination. The 18th century is upon you, and it opens with the smooth, calculated transition to the House of Hanover. Why? Because the last Stuart monarch, Queen Anne, died in 1714 without an heir, and no one wanted another Catholic king. Enter George III, a distant Protestant cousin from Hanover, Germany, who barely speaks English, but wears the crown anyway. He isn't loved, he isn't hated, but he is tolerated because he keeps the peace and leaves most of the governing to his ministers. And that, my sleepless friend, is how the office of Prime Minister is born. The real power starts to shift toward figures like Robert Walpole, often called Britain's first Prime Minister. The king becomes more figurehead than ruler. Parliament grows louder, more complex, more tangled in commerce, colonialism, and compromise. And speaking of colonies, England's gaze has shifted west. Across the Atlantic, 13 colonies have taken root. You hover now above bustling Boston, over Virginia tobacco fields, across crowded Philadelphia streets, where talk of freedom is growing louder than the bells of any church. By the time you reach 1776, the American colonies have declared independence. It's not just a war, it's a breakup, and one that Britain loses. The American Revolution rocks the empire's confidence, but not for long. Instead of collapsing, it redirects toward India, Africa, the Pacific. In these years, Britain becomes an empire not just of kings, but of merchants, governors, traders, and soldiers, and its power, while now shared with Parliament, stretches farther than the Romans could have dreamed. And at home, the Industrial Revolution ignites coal, steam, cotton, iron. Machines start replacing hands. Towns grow into cities. Smoke curls up from chimneys. You can smell it, can't you? Progress and soot. Monarchy, still there, but now under a microscope. Public opinion matters. Satirical cartoons mock royal scandals. Pamphlets criticize policies. Monarchs now rule under the ever-watchful eyes of printers and parliamentarians. The 19th century arrives with a queen who changes everything, Victoria. She reigns from 1837 to 1901. That's 63 years of marriage, mourning, railway building, telegraph sending, an empire expanding. She becomes the symbol of an age, the Victorian era. Morality, industry, expansion, etiquette, tea. Her empire becomes so vast, they say the sun never sets on it. And while Victoria technically holds immense symbolic power, prime ministers like Disraeli and Gladstone run the show. Victoria's face appears on stamps, statues, and souvenirs from Cape Town to Calcutta. She is both monarch and marketing. But beneath the empire's grandeur, cracks begin to form. Revolts, famines, unequal treaties, colonial wars. The sun may not set on the empire, but its shadow grows long. And then, in 1901, Victoria dies. She is succeeded by Edward VII, then George V, who reigns through World War I, a catastrophe of trenches, gas, and unthinkable slaughter. The monarchy survives, but just barely. Because during and after that war, kings fall across Europe and Russia, in Germany, in Austria, Hungary. Thrones collapse like dominoes. But in Britain, the monarchy adapts. George V becomes a wartime figurehead, visiting soldiers, boosting morale, changing the family name from the German-sounding Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the very British-sounding Windsor. It works. Then comes Edward VIII, who, well, abdicates in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. Love wins. Monarchy loses, at least for a moment. He's replaced by his shy younger brother George VI, who guides Britain through the firestorm of World War II. By now, the monarchy is more ceremonial than ever. And yet, during war, its symbolic power matters. George's stutter, immortalized in the King's Speech, becomes a metaphor for perseverance. He's not flashy, but he stands firm. He dies in 1952, and the throne passes to his daughter, Elizabeth II. Now you feel it, don't you? The modern age, television, jet planes, computers. Everything has changed except the monarchy, which endures, carefully walking the tightrope of tradition and adaptation. Elizabeth reigns longer than anyone before her, until her death in 2022. And today, the monarchy still exists. As of your listening, with Charles III on the throne, its powers are symbolic, its future constantly debated. Some say it's an outdated relic. Others say it's a living link to history. Historians still argue whether monarchy is a blessing, a burden, or simply a story we still want to tell. And maybe that's the truth. You've walked with us from Hastings to Windsor, from battlefield to broadcast, from chainmail to smartphones. Monarchy was never just about power. It was about belief, about continuity, about finding one human face to pin a nation's hopes, fears, and history too. And that perhaps more than anything is why it endures. And so, your long walk through the centuries draws to a quiet close. You've traveled from the grassy slopes of Hastings to the velvet coronation halls of Westminster, from the roar of rebellion to the hush of royal chambers, through bloodshed and parchment, through iron crowns and golden scepters. You've seen how England's monarchy has not just survived, but transformed. The Norman Conquest wasn't just the story of one man's victory. It was the opening chapter of a saga that would twist and evolve across 1,000 years. Every war, every alliance, every scroll signed, and sword drawn shaped not just who ruled, but how they ruled. England's monarchy is no longer what it was. It's not a war horse at the front of battle, but a quiet presence in the back of our minds. A story, a ceremony, a reminder, and maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Because sometimes, what we need most isn't a crown or a sword, but a sense of continuity, a story that outlasts us and keeps going even as we drift into sleep. So, before your eyes close completely, tell me, what part of this journey stirred you the most? Was it William's burning ambition, Elizabeth's fiery resolve, or the quiet resilience of those who simply endured? Drop a comment, share where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'd truly love to hear. And if this journey brought you peace, please hit like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow and brings more stories to fellow night owls like you. Now rest. Let the echoes of history settle softly over you. The crown is heavy, but for now, it can sleep.